Shades of Grey. Chapter 1. The crack of gunfire split the stale air of the abandoned warehouse. Veteran LAPD officer John Smith took cover behind a concrete pillar as bullets whizzed past his head. He glimpsed the body of a DEA agent splayed on the oil-stained floor, blood pooling beneath him. John had expected a routine drug bust, but it had rapidly snowballed into a bloodbath. Crouched beside the pillar, John assessed the chaotic scene. Through the haze of gun smoke, he could make out a dozen figures exchanging fire between stacks of shipping containers. He recognized the tailored suits and gold chains, and members of a Mexican cartel thought to operate in this area. On the other side, DEA agents in tactical gear lay dead or pinned down behind cover. John had no idea how a covert operation had gone so wrong so fast. All he knew was that he was smack in the middle of a war between rival organizations bent on killing each other, and anyone else who got in their way. John's partner, Taylor, crawled up next to him, face slick with sweat.
"We walked right into an ambush," he yelled over the cacophony. "We need to get out of here."
John's mind raced, tactical training kicking in. Getting out wouldn't be easy. Their flank was blocked by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The only other exit was at the far end of the warehouse, currently raked by automatic gunfire. John eyed a shipping container 20 feet away. It could provide cover to move closer to the exit. He tapped his partner and gestured to their potential escape route. Taylor nodded, tightening his grip on his pistol. On John's signal, they burst from concealment, making a frantic dash for the metal container. Bullets peppered the ground at their heels as they dove behind its bulk. One step closer to getting out of this death trap. John took a breath, then stole a glance around the edge of the container. What he saw made his blood turn to ice in his veins. Chapter 2. Pressed against the container, John's mind reeled at what he had just glimpsed. Two uniformed LAPD officers were positioned near the exit, firing on the DEA agents. Cops killing other cops, it made no sense. John turned to Taylor, seeing his own confusion mirrored in his partner's eyes. Were they really witnessing fellow officers committing cold-blooded murder? John's radio crackled to life. "This is Detective Smith. Identify yourselves." A pause then. "Rodriguez and McCoy DA brought us in for backup, but these cartel bastards ambushed us." John's gut told him it was a lie. "Stand down. We need to get unarmed people out." "Can't do that, Smith," came the reply. "It's a bloodbath here." John heard the threat behind the words. The two cops were preventing any witnesses from leaving, witnesses who could expose what was really happening here. He glanced around, searching for another way out. That's when he spotted her cowering behind a forklift 20 yards away. A young woman, no criminal or cop, an eyewitness to the truth. John tapped Taylor urgently, signaling to the girl. She likely knew exactly what had gone down here. Getting her out to testify could blow the lid off police corruption in the department. Taylor objected, insisting they escape while they still could. But John couldn't just leave her to be silenced. He met his partner's eyes unflinchingly, then broke from cover, sprinting towards the forklift. Gunfire erupted around John as he ran, bullets punching through metal and concrete. He dove behind the forklift, meeting the terrified eyes of the young woman. "I'm here to help. I'm LAPD Detective John Smith," he said gently. "What's your name?" "Hey, Hannah," she stammered.
Okay, Anna, we need to get you someplace safe so you can tell me exactly what you saw happen here. She nodded, hands trembling. John squeezed her arm reassuringly, then pulled her to her feet. Keeping their heads low, they fled through a side door into the blinding daylight outside. Chapter 3. Shielding their eyes from the sun, John led Anna away from the warehouse and through a tangle of alleys. The distant wail of approaching sirens echoed between the buildings. John felt exposed on the unfamiliar streets. Any passing patrol could spot and intercept them, the more bent cops covering their tracks. Their only option was to disappear. Reaching his unmarked car, John jumped inside with Anna. He met her frightened eyes in the rearview mirror as he peeled away from the curb. "I know this is confusing," John said. "But right now, we need to lay low while we figure out what happened back there. I don't know who we can trust." Anna just stared back, wordlessly. John couldn't imagine what was running through her mind after witnessing the outbreak of violence. But she had courage not to panic. John's radio crackled, the LAPD band ordering all units to the scene of the shootout. John grimaced, switching the radio off. He decided their only play was to go off the grid completely. Even his own department could be corrupted. As he navigated through dense traffic, a plan formed in John's mind. He had an old confidential informant from his gang unit days, a small-time criminal named Benny. A weasel, but one John knew he could leverage for intel if the price was right. Benny also ran a chop shop in the valley, where John could swap out his car for one not flagged as police. It was risky, but he didn't see another choice if he wanted to keep Anna safe and concealed. He caught her gaze in the mirror. "I have a plan to keep us off the radar, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She nodded. "I'll trust you with my life." John felt the weight of her words. Her survival depended on him now. He would not fail her. Chapter 4. John guided the car through ever-narrowing streets until they reached a ramshackle warehouse, the chop shop. Stepping from the vehicle, his eyes darted warily, hand hovering near his holstered gun. A bald man emerged from the shadows. Benny had a face only a mother could love, all jutting brows and skewed teeth. But he managed a smile at the sight of the detective. "Johnny boy, been a while. What brings you to my humble shop?" John glanced over his shoulder to ensure no one had followed them. "I need a swap, fast." Benny raised an eyebrow. Now that's unusual. The straight-laced Detective Smith going off book. "I don't have time to explain," John snapped. "It's life or death." The smile faded from Benny's face. He nodded, all business. "Okay, Johnny, let me see what I got." 10 minutes later, John and Anna were burning rubber in an '83 Buick Regal, their police-issue car left gutted on Benny's shop floor. John hoped the beater would keep them inconspicuous. As he drove, doubts swirled in John's mind. He'd worked within the system his whole career, trusting in its institutions. But now he was fleeing his own department, seeking refuge with criminals. It was his first awakening that the corruption ran deeper than he wanted to believe. Glancing at Anna in the rearview mirror, John tamped down the doubts. He had to keep her safe. He could grapple with the rest later. For now, they needed a place to hole up while they figured out the truth behind the deadly shootout. John knew a motel on the outskirts of the city where questions wouldn't be asked and cash could buy silence. He had put up witnesses there in the past when lives were at stake. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it would do for now. As the sun set, John pulled into the motel's rear lot, obscuring the car between two dumpsters. He and Anna hurried to a corner room on the first floor. It contained a single bed, a scarred table, and the lingering odor of cigarettes. Home sweet home, for now anyway. John peered cautiously through grimy curtains into the night beyond. Somewhere out there, ruthless men were searching for the key witness hidden under his protection. Deadly forces were circling them even now. But John couldn't run forever. Somehow, he had to unravel this conspiracy threatening to engulf him and find justice for those already consumed by it. Chapter 5. John sat at the scarred table, staring into a cup of bitter black coffee. 36 sleepless hours had passed since the shootout. Anna lay curled on the bed, fitfully dozing. John envied her. Each time he closed his eyes, visions of violence jarred him awake. His thoughts kept returning to the two cops who had blocked their escape from the warehouse. Dirty for sure, but were there others? How far did the rot penetrate? With no leads, John was flying blind. He needed help. Sipping the acidic coffee, an idea began to form. There was one man on the force John implicitly trusted, his mentor, Sergeant Bilkins. A veteran nearing retirement, Bilkins still had connections on the street. If anyone knew how to quietly dig up intel on corrupt officers, it was him. But reaching out to Bilkins was risky. John would have to expose himself without knowing if he could trust his mentor. It was a gamble he had to take. John slipped out to a payphone around the corner. Checking no one was near, he fed in quarters and dialed Bilkins' home number. After 2 rings, the gruff voice John knew so well answered. "Yeah. It's John Smith. I can't say much. I'm in a bad spot. I need your help." I'll pause. "Go on." John chose his words carefully, not revealing too much. Just that he needed background info on 2 LAPD officers involved in something illicit. "I'll see what I can dig up discreetly," Bilkins said after John finished. A trace of suspicion had entered the old man's voice, but he didn't press for more details. "Watch your back, kid. Call me at this number again in 24 hours. The phone clicked dead. John slowly exhaled. The first dice had been rolled. Now he could only wait and hope he hadn't made a fatal mistake. Chapter 6. Over the next 24 hours, John split his time between keeping watch outside the motel room and reassuring an increasingly stir-crazy Anna inside it. She oscillated between fatigue and restless anxiety. John couldn't blame her. The confinement was grinding him down too. But with potential threats all around, he dared not let his guard down. When the waiting became unbearable, John took walks around the neighborhood, scanning for any signs of danger. The streets were sleepy and residential, kids playing ball, folks watering lawns, teenagers smoking on corners. Suburban life existing alongside their own precarious situation. But John noticed nondescript sedans cruising the streets at odd hours. And a couple times he picked out men who eyed him a beat too long from behind newspapers and coffee cups. John's hackles rose each time. Was he being watched, his sanctuary slowly being uncovered? Or was it just frayed nerves seeing phantoms everywhere? John couldn't be sure. Returning to the motel room, John checked the cartridge of his service weapon compulsively. He knew being skittish around civilians was a slippery slope for a cop. But he couldn't deny the feeling of dark forces encircling them, just out of view. A storm gathering at his back, beyond his control. When his 24 hours were up, John braved another call to Bilkins. His mentor confirmed John's worst fears. Rumblings of a major cover-up around that shootout. And those two officers you name, IA investigated them before for unexplained income. John's gut clenched at the revelation. "Watch yourself," Bilkins warned. "And the girl?" John hung up, the storm clouds seeming to press closer. Their only chance was to expose the truth to the light. Chapter 7. Back in the motel room, John explained the situation to Anna. If they wanted answers, they'd have to infiltrate the criminal network linked to the dirty cops. Anna blanched but nodded, trusting John's judgment. His respect for her courage grew. John knew the seedy Latin nightclub El Dorado on Venice Beach was a hub for local gangs and cartel affiliates. If he could get in good with the owner, Juan, he might gain access to information the police couldn't touch. But it was dangerous. Juan had a hair-trigger temper, and armed thugs watching his back. As night fell, John slipped a pistol into his ankle holster and covered it with his pant cuff. At the door, he hesitated, then pulled Anna into a fierce hug. "Lock the door. Don't open it until you hear our code." She squeezed his arm in response. Alone, John felt exposed as he navigated dark streets toward the pulsing neon of El Dorado. He entered cautiously, senses on high alert. The club was dim, crammed with shadowy booths and a press of bodies at the bar. Reggaeton pounded from speakers, accompanied by raucous laughter and clinking glasses. John scanned the room until he spotted his target, one glowering down from a VIP platform, with goons positioned nearby. Their eyes met and Juan's glare turned suspicious. John approached slowly, hands open at his sides. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said over the music. "I just need information, and I can pay." Juan's expression remained icy, but he nodded brusquely for John to join him upstairs. Each step deeper into the lion's den made John's pulse race faster. But if he wanted the truth, this was his only lead. Chapter 8. Upstairs in Juan's office, John was patted down aggressively before Juan waved the goons out. Alone, he eyed John over his steepled fingers. "So, cop, what's this about?" Juan rumbled. John leaned forward. "There was a shootout last week at a warehouse on Sepulveda. Cops and cartel members dead. I need to know why it went down." Juan shrugged. "Business that ain't mine." John slid an envelope of cash across the desk. "I think it is." With a glance at the money, Juan smirked. "Maybe I heard some things. The cartel thought they were making a drug handoff to corrupt DEA, but they got played. Someone tipped off the DEA it was going down." John's pulse spiked. A trap meant inside information. Who tipped them off? That wasn't part of our deal. Juan's eyes narrowed. "Why is a copper like he's so hot on this?" John stood abruptly. "Just make some calls, I need names." He headed for the door, the first glimpse of the truth in hand. He spent the next week venturing further into the criminal underworld, pressing snitches and informants for anything they knew about the ambush. Bits and pieces surfaced, but progress was slow. Until finally, a name emerged: Agent David Price, DEA Field Office Supervisor. One claimed rumors said Price provided DEA the warehouse intel, possibly even the tip that lured cartel members to their deaths. It was the first solid lead in the web of corruption. John just needed to unravel how Agent Price fit in. But he knew such actions came with a price, and he was running out of funds to pay it. Chapter 9. The bills were piling up. Gas, food, motel, and exhausting his cash bribing informants. John was getting desperate. He stared at himself in the grimy bathroom mirror. Day-old stubble, deep circles under his eyes. He hardly recognized the face staring back. The hunt for truth was bringing him to the edge, forcing him across lines he never thought he'd cross. A plan formed in John's mind, as dangerous as it was logical. The cartel kept vast stashes of cash at their fronts and businesses. Illicit money they couldn't report stolen to the police. John knew a check cashing store downtown that fronted for the cartel. Hitting it would provide quick, untraceable funds. He tried pushing his conscience down as he screwed a suppressor onto his pistol. 2 a.m. John crept through alleys until the store's garish neon glowed ahead. A large man with prison tattoos manned the entrance. John circled behind, finding a back door hanging open. Gripping his silenced pistol, he slipped inside. The store was still, only the buzz of dying fluorescent lights sounding in the dark. John moved swiftly to the safe under the counter, kneeling to work the dial by feel. At last the heavy door creaked open. Stacks of cash lay within, more than he could carry. Grabbing as many banded bills as he could, John was turning to leave when a deafening klaxon alarm split the silence. His heart seized silent alarm. Footsteps pounded up front just as John burst out the back. Sprinting through streets and alleys, he didn't stop until he was gasping for breath 10 blocks away. Only then did the magnitude of what he had done sink in. He had crossed the line from detective to criminal, and managed to escape, this time at least. Chapter 10. The money from the robbery let John and Anna move to a better motel outside the city. But it did little to ease John's conscience. He was sacrificing his principles bit by bit to uncover the truth. How much further into the darkness would he have to go? Still plagued by that question, John left Anna in the motel room and drove downtown, parking a few blocks from the LAPD headquarters. He needed to know if his old friend in the evidence locker could dig up files on Agent Price and the DEA's cartel investigation. If John could just find a thread linking Price to the shootout and dirty cops, he could unravel the whole corrupt web. At a sidewalk cafe near the station, John waited nervously, baseball cap pulled low. Finally, a tall, lanky officer approached, a Vargas, John's evidence-ruined contact. Vargas sat down without greeting, sliding a manila folder under his newspaper. "It's all in there. Everything I could pull on Agent Price without raising flags." He shook his head. "Be careful, John. Internal Affairs has been around asking about you." John tensed. "What did you tell them?" "That I hadn't seen you, but others must have talked. You need to watch your back." John nodded, then clasped Vargas on the shoulder before departing with the precious folder. Back in the motel room, John and Anna paged eagerly through the documents. Most of it was unremarkable, a Price's service records and casework. But a recent incident report made John's pulse quicken. 2 months before the shootout, a DEA evidence convoy led by Price had been hit by unknown assailants. $10 and million in confiscated cartel cash had been stolen, never recovered. DEA suspected a cartel inside job. John tapped the report. This was Price's chance to get payback on the cartel, lure their members into a death trap. Anna looked up, eyes bright with realization. But he had to get dirty cops to help him do it. John felt the first clicks of the puzzle pieces falling into place. "We need to dig deeper into Price." Anna bit her lip. We were running out of leads, though, and money. She was right. They had stalled out. To uncover the dark truth, John needed to descend deeper still into the criminal underworld, even if it meant sacrificing the last shreds of his integrity. Chapter 11. John sat on the sagging motel bed, head in hands. Money was gone. Leads were dead ends. He was out of moves, unless he crossed lines he couldn't come back from. Anna sat beside him. "Let me help. You don't have to do this alone." John turned to her with hesitation. He didn't want to drag her further into danger, but he was desperate. "We need cash and information. I may know a way to get both, but it's risky." Her eyes held his unflinchingly. She was ready. That night, they sat parked in the shadows outside an imposing Spanish-style mansion ringed by iron gates. It was the home of Miguel Salazar, a notoriously vicious cartel lieutenant. If anyone knew what really happened with Price, it was him. "I'll get inside, access his computer, and download anything useful," Anna said, checking her small digital camera. "All I need is a few minutes." John gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I don't like using you as bait," but they were out of options. Anna leaned over and kissed his cheek. "I can do this. Wait for my signal." She slipped from the car, disappearing into the night. John waited, every muscle taut. His apprehensions swelled with every passing minute. Finally, a flashlight blinked from a second-floor window, the signal. Letting out a breath, John pulled up his black mask and hefted his stun baton. He surged through the mansion's back entrance, swiftly disabling 2 guards. Finding Salazar's office, he stepped inside and froze. Salazar himself stood there, grinning coldly as he aimed a pistol at John's chest. "Did you really think we wouldn't be expecting you?" John's blood turned to ice. It had all been a trap, and he had led them right into it. Chapter 12. "On your knees," Salazar barked, gun unwavering. John hesitated, then sank down slowly, mind racing for an escape. 2 thugs forced their way into the study, throwing a handcuffed Anna to the floor. John's gut twisted at the terror in her eyes. Salazar laughed. "We knew Miss Anna here had stolen files from us. Our spies and the police filled us in, so we gave her a decoy flash drive and let her come to us." He squatted before John, eyes flashing. "We know you're asking questions about Agent Price and his ambush. He cost us a lot of money. Maybe we can help each other get payback." John held the mobster's gaze, buying time to think. He was in too deep, but Salazar's offer might be his only way out now. Before he could respond, Salazar's radio buzzed. "Raid team incoming." Salazar hurled curses, then pointed his gun dead at John's forehead. "You die first." Just then, the study windows exploded inward and tear gas billowed through the room. Shadowy figures repelled inside amid the chaos. John shielded Anna as Salazar emptied his clip wildly before crumpling under gunfire. The raid team cleared the house in minutes with machine-like precision. To John's astonishment, the operatives wore no insignia or ID. A black-clad figure pulled him to his feet. "Detective Smith, you need to come with us." Stunned, John looked into the figure's familiar eyes, his old mentor, Sergeant Bilkins. The betrayal hit John like a gut punch. After all he had sacrificed, he was right back where he started, trapped in the closing web of corruption. Chapter 13. John sat across a metal table from Bilkins in a windowless room, its location unknown. He had trusted this man, relied on him for help. Now he was certain Bilkins had sold him out. Bilkins removed his mask, his craggy face unreadable. "I had to bring you in, John. Things were veering out of control." John slammed a fist on the table. "Who are you working for?" Bilkins raised a hand. "Let me explain. The shootout, the money theft, it goes deeper than you realized. There are those above Price who want it to stay buried." John's head spun. The scale of corruption seemed to widen endlessly. "They ordered me to stop you discreetly," Bilkins continued. "When I couldn't, more ruthless methods would have been employed." His eyes held a hint of regret. "We had a plan to lure you out with the girl as bait, but Salazar jumped the gun, forcing us to extract you." John's pulse pounded as he struggled to process it all. "Why tell me this now?" Bilkins leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Because you're partly right, this conspiracy needs to be exposed. But the truth is nuanced. John, true justice is never black and white." He slid a classified case file across the table. "This is the real story. Things only my clearance level can access. Keep seeking answers, but be prepared. The truth may be more complex than you realize." Chapter 14. Alone again, John pored over the case file page by page. It contained DEA reports, surveillance photos, and confidential informant statements regarding the cartel ambush. As he read, the facts Bilkins had revealed began to sink in. The intended cartel targets had not just been any gangsters. They were high-level money launderers and cocaine suppliers. In 1 year, DEA estimated they had smuggled over $50 and million worth over the border and distributed it nationwide through cartel networks. The more John examined the evidence, the clearer the picture became. This ambush had ultimately been sanctioned at the highest levels of government as a grisly means to a justified end, permanently crippling a major drug ring, flooding America with narcotics. John tried to ignore the unease growing within him. The 18 men killed that day weren't just faceless cartel soldiers, they were human beings with families and children. But under the cold calculus of the drug war, their lives had been deemed worth sacrificing to strike a decisive blow against the cartels. Could the police officers killed in the crossfire be considered necessary collateral damage by those who authorized the operation? Where did slippage of ethics end when pursuing a noble mission? John's moral compass, once so steadfast, now spun erratically. Each new revelation in this case seemed to reveal only more shades of gray. John was no closer discerning the boundaries of right and wrong than when he began. Only one thing was clear: the truths he sought were proving far darker and more complex than he ever anticipated. Chapter 15. The staged rescue had reunited Anna and John, but their reunion was laced with mistrust. "How can we know who to trust?" Anna asked bitterly after John relayed what he'd learned. "Everyone seems to have an angle in this web." "Our only play left is Price," John replied. "Confront him with what we know, and leverage it to expose the rest." Finding Price would be no easy feat. He had dropped off the grid after the ambush. But John still had contacts who owed him favors. Cash motivated cops to look the other way from all sorts of illicit activities. One such contact was Rosalie, a madam operating a high-end escort service used by wealthy and powerful men, including those with secrets to hide. John disliked dealing with her, but she often proved useful. At Rosalie's lavish hotel suite, John slipped an envelope of cash from his pocket. I'm looking for someone, David Price, DA. I'm betting some of your clients can point me to him. Rosalie thumbed through the money. Perhaps, why is a noble cop mixed up with that sniveling worm? That's my business. Can you put the word out or not? She smiled slowly. Consider it done. 2 days later, she called John with an address. That night, John and Anna sat parked down the block from a modern condo complex. Price's silver Porsche Cayenne was parked out front. He was here. They watched as Price exited, accompanied by a beautiful woman in a clinging dress. He kissed her deeply before she drove off. John turned to Anna. I don't like using his mistress as leverage, but we're out of options. Anna nodded reluctantly. If they wanted Price, they would need to get their hands dirty in the shadows. Chapter 16. John tapped his fingers on the steering wheel as they watched Price's paramour drive away. Leveraging relationships always left a bad taste in his mouth. But Price held secrets that they desperately needed. We follow her home, get photos as blackmail, John said finally, hating himself even as he said it. Then we arrange a meet with Price. Anna touched his arm, as if sensing his turmoil. I don't like it either, but we have no choice if we want the truth. John knew she was right. Sometimes justice required getting one's hands dirty. He started the car and tailed the woman's taillights flickering through the night. They tracked her from a distance to a high-rise apartment building downtown. John snapped photos of her entering the lobby, then they withdrew to wait. But as the hours ticked by, a feeling of unease grew. They were playing a ruthless game. What if their opponents were a step ahead? He couldn't shake the paranoia that they were being played. That Price was the spider, and they the flies in the web. John's misgivings were confirmed when tire spikes shredded their tires and masked figures descended on them. John reached desperately for his gun, only for his body to erupt in electric agony. When John came to, he was bound to a chair in an unfamiliar loft space, decorative lighting and brick walls surrounding him. Price stood smirking before him, snapping latex gloves over his hands. You're getting too close to things you shouldn't see, detective, he said calmly. John strained at his bonds as Price approached. Don't worry, Price continued, laying out glistening surgical tools. You'll tell us everything we want to know soon enough. We have ways of loosening lips. John steeled himself as Price lifted a serrated blade to his face. He had survived torture resistance training in the military. But something told him that what was coming would test him to the very limits of his endurance. Chapter 17. Agony blazed along every nerve as John drifted in and out of consciousness. He had no concept of time under the harsh lights piercing down on him. There was only the piercing, cutting, searing pain wielded expertly by Price and his associates. When John's voice failed from screaming, they would stop to hydrate him intravenously. Then the interrogation would resume. Questions about his sources, contacts, how much he knew about the DA conspiracy. John's skin glistened with sweat and blood, his body trembling with trauma, yet he continued resisting. Some central part of himself refused to break even as the torment threatened to unmake his mind completely. When the torture resumed, through the haze of pain, John became aware of muffled gunshots and shouts. Suddenly, Price and the others were gone, the door flung open. John sagged in his restraints, shards of hope piercing his delirium. Had help somehow arrived? It wasn't until warm hands cradled his head that he recognized Anna's face swimming into view above him. Tears shone in her eyes as she gasped at his condition. With a massive effort, John croaked, "Run, they'll be back," before his head lolled forward into darkness. When John next awoke, he was laying on a bed in an unfamiliar motel room. His wounds had been treated and dressed. Morning sunlight streamed through thin curtains. Propping himself up, grimacing, John saw Anna asleep in a chair beside him. However she had found him and managed their escape, she had saved his life. John had been a fool to think he could protect her. It was she who gave him the strength to keep fighting, even now when all seemed lost. Chapter 18. Anna's report of what had happened chilled John's blood. She had tracked Price's vehicle when they were captured, called in an anonymous tip about a kidnapping to prompt a police raid. But when LAPD stormed the place, it was deserted. Price had been warned and cleared out fast, taking John with him. The raid had only accelerated Price's sadistic interrogation. He kept ranting about how closing in on the truth was a death sentence, Anna said quietly. John squeezed her hand, seeing the lingering fear in her eyes. "You did good, kid, but Price is more dangerous than we realized. I shouldn't have let it get this far." Anna blinked back tears. "What do we do now?" John hesitated. Each new avenue of pursuit had led only to brutality and deception. How much further down this nightmare path could he justify dragging Anna? Or himself? Wordlessly, he pulled Anna into a fierce embrace, her body shaking with silent sobs against his chest. The forces arrayed against them seemed endless and implacable. But even now, in the darkest pit of despair, John felt a flicker of stubborn resolve. No, he could not surrender or turn back. Too many lives had been sacrificed already. He stroked Anna's hair gently. "We keep going," he whispered. "For those who died seeking the truth, we owe them that much." Anna looked up at him and managed a small, brave smile. They both knew there could be no happy ending now. There was only seeing this through, whatever the final cost. Chapter 19. Despite John's objections, Anna refused to remain behind. They were in this together now till the end, she insisted stubbornly. John admired her courage, even as it pained him to lead her forward into ever greater peril. Finally, John had a solid lead on the cartel boss, who had ordered the ambush that started this whole chain, a shadowy figure named Christo. Finding Christo was their last desperate gambit to shake the truth loose. Through John's contacts in the criminal underworld, they picked up rumors of a palatial cartel estate deep in the California desert. An impenetrable fortress, but home to Christo and his inner circle. John realized with dread that infiltrating the compound likely meant a suicide mission. But they were left with no other options. That night they drove east, watching the city lights fade behind them. The secluded estate waited ahead, promising either salvation or their final destruction. Moving stealthily through moon-washed desert, they approached high stucco walls studded with cameras and searchlights. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter relentlessly. John turned to Anna crouched beside him. "Last chance to turn back, I won't think less of you." Anna simply squeezed his hand in response. They both understood this might be their final goodbye. Under the cover of darkness, they breached the perimeter. Silently eliminating guards, they slipped into the mansion like specters. Moving room to room with weapons drawn, they neared the ornate double doors of Christo's office. There would be no turning back from whatever waited within. Chapter 20. John eased open the office doors, pistol ready. But instead of Christo, the room's sole occupant was a powerfully built Latino man facing away from them. He stood gazing contemplatively out a panoramic window overlooking the moonlit desert valley below. John exchanged an uneasy glance with Anna. Where was Christo? Some instinct told John the mysterious figure was waiting for them. John trained his pistol on the man's back. Don't move, hands in the air. Slowly, the man complied, turning to face them. John's breath caught. It was Hector Ruiz, a legendary cartel enforcer, thought by most to be dead. His handsome face now bore a vicious scar beneath his left eye. He stared coolly at John, unconcerned by the gun aimed at his chest. Detective Smith, I've been looking forward to meeting you, and of course your lovely companion. His voice was refined, almost genteel. John's mind raced. Hector Ruiz's reputation was fearsome, a trail of torture and dismemberment in his wake. John knew he was no match for the lethal cartel killer. He steadied the pistol with effort. Where's Christo? Ruiz smiled faintly. Our leader sends his regards, but will not be joining us. He wanted us to have an intimate conversation. He moved to the bar, pouring himself scotch. Please, take a seat. I believe we have much to discuss. John remained rooted in place between Ruiz and Anna. He had expected an ambush, not a courteous chat. Ruiz's expression hardened. There is no need for further bloodshed, detective, not when I have an offer that benefits us all. John wavered, then lowered his weapon and sank into a leather chair facing Ruiz. If they had any hope of leaving alive, he had no choice but to hear the cartel killer out. Chapter 21. Ruiz sipped his scotch casually as if conducting a routine business meeting. John remained wary, ready to grab his gun at the first hint of threat. I understand you have been seeking certain truths, Ruiz said. Truths about the ambush arranged by Agent Price and others. Their methods, however brutal, served a purpose, as I expect you've realized. John tensed. Go on. Price's rogue operatives are now loose ends that threaten us all. I propose that you and I form a temporary partnership to deal with them. John stared at Ruiz, dumbfounded. Was the cartel really willing to help take down Price? What was their angle? As if reading his thoughts, Ruiz continued. Price has become reckless. His vendetta against us is drawing too much attention. He endangers agreements that preserve order between your masters and mine. Ruiz slid a dossier across the desk. Here's everything needed to apprehend him. I only ask that you allow Christo and I to fade back into obscurity after a satisfactory resolution for all. John's head spun as he grasped at the offer's implications. Aligning with the very criminals he had hunted to take down a corrupt agent. Was this the only justice now possible in this shadow world? He met Anna's frightened eyes. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Taking a shaky breath, John turned back to Ruiz and extended his hand. The die was cast. For good or ill, they now shared a mutual destiny with the forces of darkness. Chapter 22. John sat staring into space long after Ruiz departed, grappling with the significance of the alliance he had just made. He had chosen expediency over morality, the righteous certainty that first set him on this path, now cracked beyond repair. Anna touched his shoulder gently. We do what we must to survive this and bring some justice. I don't blame you, John. John shut his eyes, wishing he shared her forgiveness. I swore an oath to uphold the law, but here I am, colluding with criminals and compromising everything I once held sacred. What does that make me now? Human, Anna replied simply. Full of flaws and contradictions, faced with impossible choices, like everyone. John turned to see her watching him with kindness and empathy. However far he had fallen, she remained his lodestar, guiding him back toward the light. Taking a deep breath, John opened the dossier on Price. It was time to finish this. The climax unfolded with dreamlike inevitability, the setup, the meet, the final confrontation between John and his former mentor Bilkins, while Price watched through sights with Anna as hostage. In the end, it was Anna who saved them all, breaking free of Price and turning his own gun against him. Price's fanaticism died with him there on that rooftop as police sirens wailed in the distance. Afterward, John quietly handed in his badge, the fight gone out of him. But he still had Anna, a glimmer of hope emerging from the ashes. The next morning's headlines proclaimed a major cartel takedown, ringleaders killed or captured overnight. A tidy ending to a messy affair of blood and secrets. As John and Anna drove for the horizon, doubts still gnawed at him. But she took his hand firmly, reminding him that whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough for now. The end.